Namaste. Welcome back to Waking Up with Mindful Surrender Yoga. Today I'm going to do something differently. I'm not answering a question from the jar. I want to address the issue of Kula Vedana again, or collective suffering, the weight of which we all carry as individuals, whether we know it or not. I want to address the reasons why I do yoga. On Saturday night, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, my family and I were all violently attacked by someone in the midst of a crystal meth-induced psychosis. It came out of nowhere. We weren't even aware this person was using crystal meth. And it was obviously something that shocked us and surprised us. We all were recipients of some form of a beating in our attempt to protect each other and get away from the situation. This situation is something that the community does not feel, what is my understanding, the community does not have the capacity to handle. Michael Singer always says how important it is for us to learn to handle what is unfolding in front of us. And until we can do that, we cannot grow and expand as individuals. We cannot really solve problems. I don't think my community, or most communities elsewhere, can handle the suffering that's occurring in our communities. The use of crystal meth and the violence that occurs because of it is just a symptom of this collective suffering that appears to be getting more and more prevalent. Everyone is suffering. And we know through this experience that suffering does exist. And we also know that the cause for suffering, according to the Buddha, is usually our desire, our preferences, our wanting things to be different than what they are. When we can look at the addiction problem in this community and other communities, especially amongst our young youth between the ages of 15 and 30, we can see that there is this propensity, or this propensity for grasping and clinging that which we think will make us feel better inside, and this pushing away of that which we feel will make us feel worse. We are all, every single one of us as individuals, are addicts waiting to happen. We are all grasping from something from the outside in order to feel better on the inside. Some of us, it's material objects. Others, it's recognition and success. For others, it's power. Others, it's people. And for a great number of people, especially between the ages of 15 and 30, it is substances. Substances that numb, help us to suppress and repress that which we do not want to deal with. But for the grace of God go I, is my motto when I look at addiction in my community. I look at crystal meth addiction not because I want to, because it seems to be had for some reason, and I call it karma in my mind and my understanding of karma, something I'm supposed to learn from. It seems to be personally thrown in my face to wake me up and make me look at this issue and look at the roots of this issue. This is not the first time I've dealt with crystal meth psychosis, so I'm quite aware of it, and I did my research, and I have a good understanding of it. Crystal meth is a drug, like many CNS stimulants, that has a tendency to affect serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine, which are our feel-good hormones in our body, our neurotransmitters that make us feel happy and alive. People use it because they want to feel better. Why do they want to feel better? Because they don't feel good the way they do. It is one of the most potent drugs out there that does the most damage and destruction, both temporarily and permanently, to the brain. And for people, I think people are fairly aware that it's a bad drug, but the use of it is increasing rather than decreasing, even with that awareness. And why is that? Because people are desperate. They're desperate to feel good, despite what it does to their physiologically and psychologically in the long run. So people who are using crystal meth are people who are in a lot of pain. They're not doing it because of the high. They're doing it to escape something that's worse than the adverse effects of crystal meth, the suffering they're experiencing inside. So the use of crystal meth to me is like an epiphany, or an epitome, I meant to say, sorry, of suffering in the human population. And I think it's coming to me for that reason. This individual psychosis that beat us all up to a great degree. I have other bruises on my body. People I love have bruises on their body. We were all attacked. This was not, as authorities want us to create the image of, as a domestic violence situation, aimed at one individual, and we just got in the way. The attack was on everybody in my household, and absolutely nobody in my household, because the person was completely psychotic. And I know this. He would go between these small periods of lucidity where you could see the blue coming back in his eyes because the pupils were reconstricting again, where he'd be asking for help and needing help. It's almost like he himself was trapped in this very dark energy and he couldn't get out of, to suddenly becoming unconscious again, where the pupils' eyes just seemed to turn black because the pupils would dilate so much, and he would become extremely aggressive, attacking, wanting to kill whatever was in front of him. My daughter might have got it more than anybody else because she felt guilty, and she tried to step in and stop him on more occasions, and therefore got the brunt of it. But this was not a domestic violence situation. This was meth-induced psychosis, and it's out there in our community. This individual not only experiences again because he uses again, this is brought on by, and I know this from past experience of dealing with someone who lived in my household who had meth psychosis, it can be brought on by extreme cravings. It can be brought on by other substances to help numb with, maybe just marijuana. It can be brought on by high anxiety levels. It can be brought on by a change in environment. It can be triggered by absolutely almost everything because the neurochemistry of his brain has changed. He's not the same person he was anymore. He has a psychosis. And this psychosis, though it may be intermittent and blamed on just a one-time thing, it's not a one-time thing from my experience. It can happen at any time. The individual that lived with me had this. And though his was more paranoia, I discovered later that he had weapons underneath his bed. He wrote letters to his dad about how he thought I was the individual that was to be feared and that he had to protect himself and his father from me. And there was these homemade weapons underneath his bed. I could not communicate to the mental health system at the time, though I tried, how desperate the situation was and how much at risk we were. So they did not understand when they said it was time for him to come home to me, to my household, why I wouldn't take him. They thought I was being dramatic, overdramatic, and ridiculous. Because I seemed to understand a little bit more than they did about this psychosis, because I was seeing it on a daily basis. Regardless, the psychosis is not gone. So this individual, this is where the trick is now released into the community. He wasn't formed, wasn't placed under 72 hours investigation like most psychosis, especially violent, when they're a threat to themselves or other individuals, would be. He was released the very next day. We got a call from mental health, or my daughter did. I listened on the side of her, outside her phone calls because she's hard of hearing, from a mental health professional asking her if she was ready to receive her boyfriend back. To my household, he doesn't live here, but to my household. And when we said no in unison, there was actually surprise on the other end of the line. And we were told, well, he's very remorseful. He promises he'll never do it again. I'm not blaming this individual for whatever decision she made. I don't understand it. I'm sure it came from somewhere. But this is where our system is at. And I look at it as a community not ready to face the extent of this severe problem. Not only with the crystal meth, but the amount of suffering that's out there. Our mental health systems are overwhelmed. Our correctional systems are overwhelmed. What do you do? But diminish the severity of a problem. Deny it, suppress it, repress it, avoid it. Blame others. We became the overdramatic people again, so that they could justify their decisions, which is the ego at play, not who they are, but the ego in them at play. All because our community cannot extend, is not ready to face, and that is even the professionals in the community, because they don't feel they have the capacity to cope with it. The extent of this problem, the extent of this suffering. That crystal meth just epitomizes. So, Kula Vedana, collective suffering is the weight of suffering we all carry. And when we don't deal with it head on, this is what's happening. This is real. This is reality. And instead do what was done yesterday. Even by, we had to fight to get a no contact order. We had no door. This individual, after beating the crap out of most of us, tore down my door to get back. Once he got out, tore down the door, the kitchen door, to get back in at us because he wanted to kill us. We had no door to hide behind. And then we're called and told he's released. And we have to fight to get a no contact order. And they were good. They tried. These officers put their lives on the line every day for us. I respect that and honor that. But because we're not coping with reality, looking totally and allowing reality to come in so we can deal with it, pushing it away in small amounts, in small ways, as ego tends to do, we are not dealing with the full extent of this problem. This individual was out again. We are put at risk again. My children are traumatized and terrified because of this. Because the community cannot handle the Kula Vedana, the reality of the collective suffering that we are all enduring. The roots of this meth use and the psychosis that occurred on Saturday night, this violent attack, is not in this individual. They're not bad. They're not wrong. They are not evil. Perpetrators are not evil. They're just overwhelmed by a negativity that comes from suffering and from the ways in which they handle their suffering. We have to get to the roots. This individual is only one in my community, amongst the great numbers of people who are now using crystal meth. One. And though, from my studies, crystal meth psychosis maybe only happens in 2.7%. Anywhere, I think it was 2.7% to 10.7%. I can't remember the exact numbers of individuals who use these substances. And to this extent, most are paranoid, most are whatever. It is enough to say there's a public safety risk. So for the sake of if we're not going to look at suffering, let's look at public safety and say we have to do something about this problem. Let's look at the fact that our systems are overwhelmed and we need to find resources outside these systems that can help us deal with this problem. And that brings me back to yoga. No, that doesn't mean go to a yoga class and do your asanas and some pranayama. I'm talking about the true meaning of yoga. Looking inward at ourselves and our own psyches and our own suffering and realizing that this grasping and clinging and pushing away out there, that which doesn't feel comfortable, pulling in that which does so that we feel better inside, is not the answer. It is not the answer. The answer is finding the center. During the crisis on Saturday morning, in those 15 minutes when my family was being attacked, I stayed calm. I stayed clear. My body was responding. I was certainly having a fight or flight system activation for sure. I could even hear myself screaming, but it didn't belong to the mind. It belonged to the body. The mind stayed clear to get me through that. Even at one point, when I was pushed into the corner and my daughter pushed on top of me, and I wanted to protect her, so I rolled over on her, and I got the beatings on the back so that she wouldn't get them. I heard myself saying to myself in that calmest way, oh, so this is what it's like to experience this. I may die here, but this is what it's like. And there was this fascination with me being the experiencer. In other words, my yoga was kicking in. I was getting beyond the psyche that is the things. The psyche is the part of us that gets addicted, the part of us that's violent, the part of us that's reacting, the part of us that has ego and has to be right, the part of us that minimizes the victim's complaints. That part of me was gone, and I was simply in the clear state of being. I was in my seat of consciousness. Yoga has done that for me. And if I wasn't, I may not have survived that night. But I was, and I could still act and do and knew exactly what needed to be done, and I was calm and centered and moving my body around where it needed to be moved to avoid the hits and to protect others. But that was amazing. The only reactivity came later when I was dealing with the formal support systems. That's, to be honest, that's where the trauma for me came in. But the point is, if we can do that in the time of crisis, we can do that in this problem-solving mechanism we need to take over, that we need to be involved in order to work with this suffering that the people from the ages of 15 to 30 seem to be experiencing in greater numbers. We have to stop depending on the formal support systems that cannot support us. I'm sorry, but we can't. They're overwhelmed. We need to start going inward. It takes one mind to start the process. If I can heal this thing inside here, then there's going to be a ripple effect outward. And if the people around me can heal their minds, there's going to be a ripple effect around them. This is what it does, what yoga does. Helps to clear our mind and keep our hearts open so that we can handle life, handle reality. We were made to believe, because the formal support systems could not deal with the full reality of the situation, that what we were experiencing wasn't real. But we knew it was. We knew what happened to us. We knew how real it was. And we all need to start realizing how real this problem is. Realize how much suffering is in the world. Realize that we all have to do something about it. We have to stop judging, which is a part of our reactive mind. Stop putting people who are on meth over here and saying, okay, they're bad, wrong, let's shoot them over here. Those are human beings, just like us. That perpetrator that was attacking me, I could see in him that he was just like me. He was just lost in his psyche. Beneath the psyche, we're all the same. So the mental health system focuses on the psyche. Let's go somewhere else. Not that I'm saying the mental health system is wrong and you need to use it for sure for certain things, but maybe we're going to put more of our emphasis on something other than mental health, not spiritual health, on that exists behind the mind. Let's recognize that we stay healthy mentally and physically. So our systems are not so overrun, so that victims aren't turned into villains for wanting to protect themselves, because there will be no need to protect themselves. And perpetrators get the help they need, the real help they need. And so that we can diminish the amount of Kula Vedana, collective suffering, that we're all holding on to. Yoga is a way out. It really is. It's a hard way out. It's not an easy way. It's not like the way we've been taught and conditioned to believe. But once we start, we realize the simplicity of it. and the truth of it. And I realized that Saturday night when I was being attacked. Sure, my ego came back the next morning when I was dealing with these formal support systems. But during the attack, I realized that there was a person behind the mind. And that person is, or not a person. There was something behind the mind that was far greater than the mind, far greater than the body, that would see me through, no matter what happened. I wasn't it. I wasn't the body that was getting beat upon. I wasn't the mind with its thoughts and its ideas and its judgments. I wasn't the situation I was in. There was something greater there. And yoga helped me to see that. And that experience I had was testament to it. And I think it was that, because of that experience, that I'm here now to once again emphasize the gold that can be found in yoga or any spiritual practice like its nature. And again, I use the term spiritual loosely. You can call it whatever you want. Healing practice, personal practice, practice to prevent us from suffering or stop the suffering or diminish the suffering. There is a way out. Please, let's work together. I mean, let's not diminish this problem that's in our communities today. Let's not get lost in ego saying, I have to be right and they have to be wrong. We all make mistakes. People in systems make mistakes. Let's not judge. Let's not fight. Let's not struggle against. Let's just accept the reality. There's so much suffering in the world, and there is a cause for suffering. But like the Buddha said, there's also a way through suffering. You need to get around the mind to the thing that can help us all. Well, that's all I have to say about that. Thank you for joining me. Namaste.